Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, the CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media. This video show and podcast is produced with the support of CIO.com and the digital media division of Foundry, an IDG company. We're streaming live to you right now on LinkedIn and on our CIO channel on YouTube. And we cordially invite our viewers to send in and respond with your own questions to our guest today. We have editors watching the feed, and they will make sure to pass your questions along so we can ask them in real time to my guests. And this is an unusual show for CIO Leadership Live because I have not just one guest, but two. I'm joined today by Carl Pierberg, who is the Senior VP and CTO of Strategy and Innovation at AMB Sports and Entertainment. Headquartered in Atlanta, AMB Sports and Entertainment includes the National Football League's Atlanta Falcons, the Major League Soccer's Atlanta United, and the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. Last year, the franchise value of the Falcons was estimated at $4.7 billion. Carl brings a great depth of software engineering, expertise in IT, and data analytics. He started out in consulting before joining the Chicago Bears as their IT manager of football systems in 2002. 3 years later, in 2005, he moved to the Atlanta Falcons, holding various positions there as director and then later senior director of football systems. Since 2018, in 2005, he moved to the Atlanta Falcons. I said that already. Since 2018, he has worked for the Falcons' parent organization, AMB Sports, as their vice president of technology, data, and analytics, and then chief technology officer, and then in March of last year, added the position of senior vice president of strategy and innovation to his roster of CTO responsibilities. Joining Carl and I today also is Jeremy Duval. He is the CEO of Atlanta-based 7Factor Software and a longtime software engineering pal who hangs around with Carl. You're going to hear a lot about the things they talk about over beers. Jeremy founded 7Factor Software in 2017 as a cloud-native software engineering as a service company. His team works with tech-forward enterprises such as the Atlanta Falcons, as well as other ambitious startups. He has more than a decade of software engineering experience building and advising others. And he's also a contributor to InfoWorld, which is one of CIO's sister publications, where he's written very candidly about developer issues and concerns. Most recently, he's been a regular guest host on Foundry's Today in Tech podcast, joining my longtime editorial colleague and show host, Keith Shaw. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. It's really nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Okay, now two of the biggest topics we're going to dive into today are the fan experience, which other CIOs, it might be the customer experience, but it's the fan experience here. And that'll be a lot from Carl's side of the roster. And then with Jeremy, we're also going to get into the developer experience and various ways that CIOs and senior IT leaders could be paying more attention and doing a better job of making sure developers are staying with their organizations. But before we get into that, let's start with the story of what brought you two into each other's professional orbits.
Jeremy, you want to start on this one?
Yeah, for sure. So Carl and I have a mutual friend that I got an introduction through a friend of a friend because I was looking for basically a coach. Back when I started my business, it was all just me figuring things out, and anyone who's done that, you kind of want to find smart folks to advise you as quickly as possible, especially if you know you're not the smartest seat in the house. So I found a friend of a friend, and we got an introduction to Carl, and the thing that I noticed most about Carl is that he was struggling with some of the same things that I was at that time. We were both sort of building our businesses at the same time. And we hung out and spent time together and really started just basically complaining to one another
Yeah.
about the types of issues. It's like, man, this sucks. How, I want to fire that person. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but those kinds of conversations where it's like you can't have candid chats with people in your orbit, especially when you're a leader in a company. And I needed that, and I got that through Carl.
Well,
Yes.
and Carl, you said you grew up in a sports front office essentially, because before you were a football director of systems, you were actually a football player. So
In
you
college,
understood a lot of the issues.
Sure.
But it can end up feeling like a very lonely experience. I take it, becoming the boss of all the IT folks around you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny you use the word IT folks when you're a developer and you're an analyst, a database architect, wherever you are, you're almost even a little bit isolated within the IT folk.
Okay.
You're having to do a lot of, it's funny. I say my job as CTO, it's half HR, half PR, where you're having to go out and like sell what you're doing, explain what you're doing. You have to do a ton of listening, which is really an important skill set to have as a CTO. And then bring that back together and actually develop. Then you got to turn around and actually build something out of it. And so, I think that's where I think Jeremy and I really kind of gravitated towards each other was, we had to play both hats, right? We had to play the listening hat and what do my clients, in this case, coaches or scouts, really need? And then turn around and be like, okay, now how do I actually do this? How do I actually pull this off? And a lot of times you're a development team of one, maybe two. I think that's where we kind of locked onto each other is, we're both kind of in that doer mindset where I think when I think about it, what I've romanticized in my head anyway about what large scale corporate development is it's product owners and it's maps and it's really really super clean backlogs and well-groomed stories and all that. And sometimes we're like, hey, I'm pushing code in between rounds of the draft sometimes, and it's just kind of funny that way. So our ability to kind of just share in that pain of having to be agile and responsive at the same token, you got to build sustainability in, or else you end up just beating yourself down.
Well, and you both pointed out that Jeremy, of course, started with a smaller group. Your company is now over 50 people. But Carl, you still it's a small but mighty team that's doing things for the Falcons.
Yeah, we've grown. It's been good. And we've, again, I think that's been a testament to our organization and our owner, basically saying, hey, we need to get better and we need to expand and grow. And there is no finish line. You look at our values really drive that, and things like innovate continuously. I think that's really important. And we've hired leaders that, thankfully we can talk with and we can explain, hey, here's what we're doing. I mean, some of those things we've talked about doing, it's hard to draw those direct lines between, hey, if you give me this, I guarantee you we're going to get X, times two. A lot of times it is aspirational, and to have the support of leadership like that is really important, be it on the football side or the business side. So,
well, let's talk through some of the technology and the driving forces with the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, which, if I've been told correctly, is one of the largest and the busiest stadium in the world.
We like to think so. We kind of refer to it, and I don't know if there's an official metric on this, as the largest major event stadium in the world.
Okay.
We pride ourselves on that. We think it's, first of all, the most unique and iconic looking. It looks like you don't mistake Mercedes-Benz for anything else. And when you're at Mercedes-Benz, you don't mistake it for anything other than what it is. It is the most amazing stadium you'll ever go to. And it's our job and our mandate to keep it that way. We've recently thrown out kind of this vision of, we're going to create the most impactful, value-added fan experience in the world, not just bells and whistles, but actually do stuff that matters. But, Mercedes-Benz, we do consider it, again, the busiest stadium in the world. On an average year, we've got 50 plus major events, and those events are, 45 to 50,000 or more tickets distributed a year. We end up distributing over 3 million tickets over the course of a year. We get over 500,000 unique individuals, and honestly more than that, because we really don't have insight into the actual specific individuals that come in, which is one of our kind of pain points. And of those 500,000 people that come through in a given year, only about 35,000 are for our core, kind of anchor teams, the Falcons and Atlanta United. So we just got diversity that comes through in terms of the events. Obviously we've got things like college football and concerts. Taylor was amazing to have here. But we have the Super Bowl. We've had national championship games. We've had, the SEC championship game every year, MLS Cup, Elton John. We also have, since the stadium opened, over 600 private events, which are major sources for us. We've had 3 motion pictures filmed here, 2 weddings and 10 proms. So, we get the diversity here. And
Yep.
from the technical part of that, it's built really on my teammate, Danny Branch, who is our CIO, built an amazing technical foundation. And when we talk about that enabling layer that our CIOs are responsible for of just communication and connectivity, be it from, we've got again, I can probably go a little bit deeper on this group with
Sure.
a full fiber to the desktop PON network where we're pushing stuff around. We've got over 45,000 miles of fiber in the building. We've got Wi-Fi 6, we got DAS, we got our all this stuff is in there. And wherever we need connectivity in there, we've got it. We've got data centers. We've got the ability that when I get to come around, which my job is just to come in and break stuff and do new things and things that are different. I have this amazing foundation to push off of where I'm not having to worry about that. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
What we have here at Mercedes-Benz.
Well, because one of the things you said to me when we were getting ready for this interview today was that you had no interest in being a CIO. You really enjoy being the CTO. Is it because you intend to stay hands-on with the technology and just you don't want to get dragged off into that top leadership circle?
Yeah, we were supposed to keep that private between me and you. That wasn't. I'm just kidding. CTO for me is one of those things where we're really looking for new ways of using technology to solve new business problems, and that's kind of been maybe more my definition. And it requires you to be a little riskier and a little more tolerant to pain in your own life. And I think that's cool. But the ability to build and create and just explore is what I really like about the role that I at least have here at AMBSE.
Okay. And Jeremy, what do you hear? What do you work with the CIOs and other CTOs, other senior IT leaders that are part of your business work as the software company? What do you hear that is similar to what Carl was just talking about?
So, as with respect to sort of the technologies at play, I think that a lot of companies are starting to embrace riskier technologies, artificial intelligence. I mean, we're going to talk about that more later, obviously. But they're starting to look at technology as being a core piece of their business, which, I mean, 15 years ago when I was becoming an engineer, it wasn't quite as prominent of a piece of your business, right? You're focusing more on how we're selling to customers and how we're kind of driving our revenue streams through marketing and things like that. And now, because we've had this explosion of technology in the past 10 to 15 years, everybody is all in on software, right? You've heard the quote that software is eating the world. I would argue it's kind of corrupting the world in ways because there's a lot of bad software out there, which is kind of our mission in life, is to try and solve for the bad software that exists and all the legacy systems that are kind of sitting around and not really adding value to your top line. But I'm excited about the types of technologies that people are beginning to embrace. And even going back to artificial intelligence, and a lot of engineers were scared of it when it came out. Honestly, it's just math. I know that's a reductionist view. It's a very awesome and cool technology, but embracing these sort of newer ways of working, things like Wi-Fi 6 that Carl was talking about, putting fiber in the entire building is amazing because latency is going to be next to nothing, and you can do amazing real-time things with highly efficient technologies that are across that building. I agree. I think Carl you have like the coolest stadium on the planet. It is one of the most technologically advanced stadiums, even back to some of the projects that we're going to talk about that we've done with y'all, would not be possible if you did not have that sort of foundry of here's all of the amazing work that we've put into creating one of the most technologically advanced stadiums in the world. So my CIOs, the people I'm talking to, are looking for ways, how do we look to the future of the technology that's coming down the pipe. And again, my background is in academics and research, and I did some work on some of the first multi-touch drivers before the iPhone existed. So it's cool to see kind of the things that I did, in academic research and all of the conversations about these amazing technologies that people are starting to embrace. It's cool to see people turn those into products and to deploy those out to make people's lives better, right? Again, going back to fan experience, I'm sure you're going to talk about all the awesome stuff that's in the stadium that make it seamless and make it a cool experience to walk in and go to a game or go to a concert, and to kind of reduce the friction of what your customer's doing. So pivot that away from fan experience. CIOs and CTOs, your job is to reduce the friction from a technology perspective, right? And Kent Beck actually calls, those of you who know Kent Beck, he's like a god among men in developer speak. But I was talking to him on LinkedIn, and he describes technical debt as a form of friction. And so we need to be thinking, as we embrace more technologies and we look at what we're trying to achieve for our CEOs, how do we align our business strategy from a technology perspective to reduce that friction and to make everyone's lives better from a developer experience perspective, fan experience, customer experience, whatever.
And Carl, talk about some of the things you've done that have made that fan experience frictionless at the stadium.
So there's some real obvious and upfront ones, and there's other things that we're still working on and trying to figure out. But basically, we look at friction as anything that keeps you from, getting what you want and enjoying the event that you came here to see. And sometimes, fans want a little bit of friction in the stadium. They want to walk around. They, believe it or not, they want to wait in line and look at some things. Other times they don't. And so, areas that we've kind of hit on are things like replacing the traditional old school magnetometers where you'd walk through and everyone would beep and you'd get wanded and everything else. We worked with an awesome company called Evolve that featured more of a open lane kind of way to walk through, and it reduced our touch point to about 10% under that. Really, about 8% of fans now kind of need to get checked and moved, and we can move through about 4 times the volume than we could through a normal one. We had a tremendous cost savings by doing that, and a huge fan experience gain by just letting people go there. The challenge with that was we had a bottleneck or a friction point there, and as soon as we removed it, we created another one at the turnstile. And so we then kind of moved to adjust to that, to start looking at using things like biometric authentication on, doing things where we really saw what slowed people down was when they had especially multiple tickets and getting their phone out and having that phone ready. And there wasn't a way for the prepared fan to get, not get caught behind 4 unprepared fans. And so we worked with our partners at Delta, who have done some similar work in this space, and we created Delta fly-through lanes where fans can, for free, just before they come in, they snap a selfie real quick and they walk up, the screen recognizes them. It says, again, welcome, Jeremy. You've got 4 tickets. Yep. And you walk in and you're all set to go. And it really, again, it's kind of a 4x multiplier for us on getting fans through. And it's again opt-in only. We don't mandate anyone do anything that way, but we've developed a pretty loyal following on that of people that do it. Also found that fans are more than willing to do it even one time. About a quarter of our fans that use it only went to one event at Mercedes-Benz last year, or one Falcons game, I should say. And they read their note before you go. They say, hey, this is going to save me time. No problem. I'm doing it. I'm ready to go. Once we're in the stadium, we've then begun again trying to how can we get rid of lines? How can we get rid of bottlenecks, especially when you know what you want? And so we've got 2 kind of technologies we've experienced with there, experiment with there. One is we've installed 3. We've got a 4th one coming, frictionless stores, where you basically tap a credit card right now and you walk in, you grab what you want, you just walk out, and there's no checkout, there's nothing else. You get charged for what you grab. Our partners at iFi were awesome with that, and we continue to expand out with that. And what we found it was kind of a slow ramp up, but once, especially our fans that have been there once, like they knew exactly what to do, and they knew exactly, hey, it's a timeout. I know I can make it to iFi and back before we get back from a timeout, and that definitely drove an uptick in sales without cannibalizing nearby. And the other area we've really experimented with is extending that biometric entry experience to the ordering stand. And we've worked on, with one of our partners, some biometric cocktails called Spirited, and that's again kind of a closed beta we have right now. We'll be expanding again for United season a little bit, but with this one, you can walk up, basically, can authenticate with your face, do age verification, do payment, and just have the machine unlocked. You can self-serve yourself a cocktail and get out of there. And that's again, kind of a combination between reducing the friction, doing some research into fans wanting more, mixed drink access, and our ability to kind of connect those systems together. Really a lot of sense where Jeremy's team kind of came in to help us create that experience.
Okay. And I'm thinking of too how you had explained to me earlier that there is so much technology in the stadium that you operationally you have to you can't just run in and break stuff and apply it. You also everything has to play well together.
Yeah.
Is there a particular way that you approach that with your small but mighty team?
It's funny because that small but mighty team extends to not just our dev team, it expands to everyone at the stadium. And so here's a good example. 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, we had the 2022 Peach Bowl on New Year's Eve at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And in that game, the final field goal attempt was kicked right before the stroke of midnight, hit the ground right after the stroke of midnight. The game was over at that point, and we had a Falcons game ready to go by 11 o'clock the next morning, right? So we had to transition from one game to the next in 11 hours. We had, for that first one, we had 71,000 orders go through our food and beverage system. The next one, we had 36,000 go back to back like that, right? So as we're talking about introducing new technologies like Hi-Fi, like Spirited, we've got to make sure that works with the whole stadium, and they can close out, they can reconcile, they can do their performance analysis, and then get reset so that we can measure and go the next day. So when we're going through a pilot, okay, we got a little bit of grace, but if we're hoping to expand, it's got to fit in with the flow of how everyone does business. Because our food and bev partners are going to tell me to pound sand if I make them go through 5 different procedures to close out of a stadium.
And the role that you and your team are playing in enabling that, Jeremy, talk a little bit about that.
So I think what's awesome, there's a duality between what Carl's talking about with the fan experience and what we're talking about for developer experience. Small but mighty is a very important approach to innovation. There's a lot of psychology around the larger your teams are, the less effective they are. There's a thing called Dunbar's number, which is applied specifically to social situations, but it actually maps to professional. There's some studies that have been done that show that it also maps to some professional situations as well. Smaller teams are more communicative. They can have chats off the cuff to solve problems more quickly. You avoid design by committee because there's typically a captain that just stands up and starts, being the quarterback of the team. Anyone who's been in a team sort of sees this, right? And these are the types of things that our company has embraced as a culture and as a way of life. And these are the chats that Carl and I had early on, is how do you achieve more with less? How do you build a team that is excited to come in and work every day and execute and avoid the friction of the things that get in their way, right? So again, going back to what Carl said, his obsession is reducing friction in the stadium. My obsession is reducing friction on the development production floor, so that we can embrace ideas like developer experience. We can do CI/CD correctly without 15 toll gates and 10 cabs, which I'm sure some of your listeners have experienced or maybe even implemented systems like this. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it certainly slows you down. And one of the things that I've enjoyed watching Carl do is challenge that status quo of, hey, we can go faster. We can do more with less. Yes, we need the right bodies on the floor to do it, but we can get a lot more done by focusing on reducing friction inside our engineering teams and getting a smaller team to do more by empowering them.
And I want to actually pivot over for a minute or two to talk about when you say the developer experience. It sounds like it's frictionless, but it's also more empowered. I want you to explain that a little bit more.
Yeah.
It was it's one of our favorite buzzwords for this conversation today, but it's something that I don't think I've ever talked with a CIO in a couple of decades now where talent acquisition and retention wasn't incredibly high on their list, usually in the top 3. And in the last few years, a real focus on building up that internal engineering expertise. All the things that got outsourced 10 years ago, they're all insourced now, and everybody wants more of these incredibly talented developers who can make this kind of thing happen. So what is different now about the developer experience and what CIOs need to be paying attention to versus just a few years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a very complicated question.
Yeah.
Because we're dealing with the psychology of human beings here, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the big changes that I've seen, and you pointed it out, is in sort of the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a rush to offshore, and there was a rush to commoditize software engineering because for good reasons, we thought that, well, this is about cost savings, and all I have to do is ship the right spec to the right people, and I can get output that produces some form of widget that I can plug into my systems, and it goes and makes me money. We know that is in fact not true now, right? Through the Scrum renaissance of the 2010s on into what we're seeing today, which is people are beginning to even question Scrum and say, wait a minute, is this even the right process? We're not sure. So the developer experience is an outgrowth of the DevOps movement, if y'all remember. That was another buzzword about 5 years ago where we applied Agile to operations, and now all of a sudden we are pushing to production every day. Whereas companies like Microsoft, which I worked for, were doing that before this, right? So we're seeing people focus more on productivity as an obsession in the engineering team, right? And productivity is a function of many things. It's a function of proper inputs, which produce good outputs. It's a function of psychological safety in your team, so you understand that people can raise their hands when they feel like they're doing something sideways or they're not certain about a particular decision. They can raise their hands and challenge that. And it's also a function of all of our what I like to call our software pipeline, which is product to UX to development to DevOps, or your platform team, which is the new hotness. There's another buzzword, right? Platform teams. All of this produces an outcome, right? So the product people produce the business problem and the challenge you're trying to solve, and then that flows through my pipeline and comes out the other side as a piece of software, right? Pretty simple, right? The picture is clear. Where developer experience really shines is when we're talking about how efficiently and effectively an engineering team can push that code out to prove a hypothesis that product has bet the farm on, right? If Carl says, I think I can increase fan experience, I think I can get 100,000 more people through our lines every day if we tested this one little tweak to this system over here. He needs to be able to do that, right? He needs to be empowered to run that experiment, to test it and see if it is in fact something that produces value for the company. Developer experience is I, as an engineer, am sitting in my dev team, and when I hear that from Carl, 1, I know why. 2, I understand the business outcomes of that. 3, I'm empowered to go out and do those experiments and build code in a way that's not so locked down, except in regulated. It's a totally different. We'll put the regulated industries aside for a minute, because this doesn't apply to my banks and my healthcare people out there. Well, kind of. And for those engineers to enjoy what they're doing and to be able to feed back into the engineering life cycle. So I'm not just a cog in a wheel sitting here taking a ticket, reading my 5 requirements, writing my code, pushing to production, and that's all I do, right? Our engineering teams need to be able to question product, question UX, and have conversations about, is this in fact adding business value? Because my context is, I've written 10 systems that kind of do this too, or maybe in another job, I wrote a piece of software that did exactly what you're looking for and it didn't work. So maybe we need to talk about that and me feed my information back into the broader team. So it's more about, developer experience is about not treating teams as cogs and wheels and as actual business value. Because as we said, software is eating the world. We need to lean into the experts that have created assets that our biggest companies rely on and get their input back into what we're building.
Yes. Okay. You've been nodding quite a bit there, Carl. I want you to weigh in too.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy put it best. I mean, developers are happiest when they're building and creating and being productive, and they understand what they're doing contributes to the bottom line. That's just it. And when we are doing things like being stuck in monolithic old dev stacks, when we can't push to production, we can't check in code, when troubleshooting takes 3 days because of poor documentation or poor standards, those are things that are inside of our control that we can help to standardize, mitigate, and get rid of. then it does become that external relationship and that ability to partner with the business to do the other areas, the UI, UX, the product understanding, the product management, of having the right pipeline there, depending on how big your team is, to be able to voice those concerns. We had an issue this morning where we had a very eager client who had a product idea they were guaranteed. They came to us and told us the entire way they wanted it built, and we're like, look, I love the enthusiasm. Help us understand the outcome, because we've done this before. Like, help us. We can smooth this out and get to a better spot with you. But that takes a little bit of them also understanding that, hey, we're not just a bunch of nerds here. Like, we can think about business problems. And that's where I think that level of communication, I think that's what makes a really good, I'll call them a technical teammate, because they could be any number of roles, but your ability to have normal, those kind of outcome-based conversations that don't necessarily get locked into the tech with members of the business really is what brings value to you as a person.
Well,
that's the reason why I'm where I'm at, is because I can talk to football coaches. I can talk to, whatever. Otherwise, I'd be doing the same thing I was doing 20 years ago.
So you can talk to football coaches, you can talk to technical people, you can also talk to business people and help them. Jeremy, the piece you wrote for InfoWorld on this last year, the headline was "Manage Morale, Not Metrics, 100%. For a more effective engineering team." Do you both think this is something that kind of everybody gets now, or is this going to be news to anybody?
I think I'll go first. I'll put my name out there for the Flame Wars in the comments. I don't think I think this is a thing we all know about. Yeah. But you look at Dora and some of these other metric frameworks. Check out Abi Noda on LinkedIn. I'm going to plug him. He's a friend of mine, and he has an entire company that's designed to talk about developer experience. And he has a lot of studies that he's done with Google and podcasts that he's had with Spotify VPs, where we discuss these things like Dora metrics and what value are they providing, right? When I said manage morale, not metrics, I'm not saying that we shouldn't measure what we're doing. Telemetry is incredibly important. But when you start measuring, when you start pushing metrics, right, there's Goodhart's law, right? When a measurement becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure, right? It's more about having conversations with your engineering team and using metrics as telemetry to pivot the organization towards a more effective way of solving outcomes. What Carl, you said it best, right? Bring me outcomes as a product organization, as a business. Bring me outcomes, right? If I'm your VP of engineering and you come to me with a prescriptive way of solving a problem, I'm just going to say no, because I want an outcome. What are we trying to do? Because my team are experts, right? They're software engineers that I have hired and spent all my time and effort creating a culture where they can maintain productivity and execute against your problems as a business. Bring me the outcomes you're trying to solve for, and I will in turn make sure that they're happy, well-fed, cared for, excited, psychologically safe, focusing on root causes as opposed to blaming people for issues, which is a big issue with infighting, right, that we have in our organization. Like, as a CIO, I have too many problems to worry about because you're managing like a group of people, and people are very hard to deal with. Like, I need people to cut me some slack and make my job easier, right? Is what I'm telling others, is make my life, please don't make my life hard where I have to manage you and also manage all these people that are just fighting, and it's fun.
Yeah. So well said. So well.
Well, we have a question from our alert and watching audience, and it actually goes back to something we touched on earlier. For an organization of AMB Sports' size and kind, how are the responsibilities split between the CTO and the CIO? Yeah, I mean, that seems to be a very important way that you're making it all work. So talk about that in a little more detail.
So for us, the way we split that up is, it's probably a little too generic, but I'll put it this way: a CIO is primarily run the business. CTO is a little bit more grow the business in their focus. I don't focus a ton on things that I don't support things, generally speaking. I more find strategic initiatives, explore, can we execute on them? Make sure that we connect up into our business into sustainable, integrated ways that use our existing systems, philosophies, security requirements, all that kind of stuff. And then we turn them over and operationalize them. And we start on the next thing. We also handle things like data analytics, will be probably driving AI for the most part,
Mhm.
things like that. Our CIO handles, infrastructure, making sure that we're like, the things that the lights have to stay on to do, like that is his job. And frankly, it's awesome because I've got great partners in both Danny Branch and Kevin Pope, who are kind of a former and our current CIO. Like we spend so like in fact I have drinks with him after. We don't drink as much as is portrayed on this podcast, but we're going out right after this just because we catch up like, hey, what are you working on? What are you thinking about?
Yeah.
And we just are constantly pushing on each other on, hey, how can we get better here? But Kevin's job is to make sure that, hey, we can sell hot dogs on Sunday. We can have tickets up on
Yep.
Sunday. We can do this. And mine is like, hey, here's a new way we can sell hot dogs. Here's a new way. And hey, it's going to eventually fit in and really make a difference for us business-wise. So that's kind of the way that I would split that up.
Yeah.
It's probably not the Gartner answer, but
Oh, thank you.
yeah, that's the way that I would do it.
I know. And the second question we have, and this one is even more fun, it's another question for Carl. Do you foresee integrating fantasy games for the fans, giving that rich hybrid experience of fans attending games at the stadium and also playing games?
Okay.
Talk about multitasking, right?
So you're getting a couple of answers from me on this, right? One is I'm 47 years old. I grew up working for a football team, and so because of that, like I absolutely hate fantasy because you should be rooting for a team, not a player, and like that's just old man yells at cloud, kind of. I know that, right? So I wanted to state that so you guys have like where I'm coming from.
Okay.
When it comes to integrating it, we know that fans, when they come to the stadium, like they do a myriad of things. And I was looking for the numbers right before, and I couldn't find it, but we do terabytes of data over our networks for major events. And so we know things like, fantasy and social and video uploads and all that stuff. We have to facilitate that because they want to do that. As far as integrating some of that stuff in, I think that's where we got to look at where's the value add for us. I'm a big fan of let's find the things that people do well, and then if it adds, let's bring it in and do it. But like, for example, I don't know what value you get by going to the Falcons to manage your fantasy app or your fantasy team and see what's going on there, right? There's people that do it better. I'd rather partner with them, advertise with them, gain them as a sponsor, support them that way, and let them kind of drive and do things that way, than make what frankly would be a subpar product that other people do really, really well.
Okay. It's a good
But
point.
we know that we need to support them from that base connectivity, how they use our stadium perspective. If they can't get online, if they can't check their stats, if they can't send that video to, mom, it's over.
Okay. Now, actually, that segues really nicely into something I wanted to ask about as well, and it has to do with behaviors, fan behaviors. The industry, your industry, is very much back to business as usual. Sports events and concerts are sold out and in person and all that, but the fan behaviors have changed in the post-pandemic era. We talked about this a little. Get into that a bit about what has changed and what kind of ripple effect does that have on what you need to do?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've seen is I think fans expect a little more, which is great. I think fans expect us to know a little bit more about them. I think that is becoming more and more table stakes is they don't want to be treated like fan 107320, which is my Ticketmaster ID number. They want to be treated more as, hey, this is Carl at the very least, and to do some things that way. And frankly, that's where I think, when we start talking about, frictionless and biometrics and fan experience, there's really kind of two levers we really know that we need to pull as we're hitting on those use cases. One is personalization, just making people feel special in big or little ways, right? And that can be as little as your name on a screen. One of my favorite moments when we were implementing Delta Fly-Through, we're just doing it as a pilot, is a woman walked up. She had her first time she had her face come up and said her name, and she goes, "She knows me," and was just ecstatic. Like those are the moments, like when they see their name and their 4 tickets, and the guy high fives his 3 friends that are with him. Like those are the cool moments that just you don't get from business as usual. And then that will go all the way up into I want to be careful here, but like respected, purpose, valued, value-proofed, generative AI on making sure as we're communicating with our fans, we're sending the right messages to them, especially when it involves the event day experience. we got stats all over the place, but 75% of the people that park at Mercedes-Benz on game day buy their parking that day and don't realize how far out they need to park. A lot of those fans, and I don't have this number, but a majority of those fans get their tickets transferred to them or buy them within 48 hours of the event. We've got to be responsive and agile to message those fans and say, look, if you're parking, don't come all the way downtown because you're just going to have to turn around and go back out to one of these lots. Use one of these 6 lots. Here's a coupon for that code. But if Jeremy's coming in, he's a season ticket member, I can't send him that message because I will lose all credibility. Instead, to Jeremy, I got to say, hey, we just implemented a new license plate scanner at our gates. Let me know your license plate number and you'll be able to pull right in and you'll do that, right? I need to be able to say, hey, welcome Jeremy to the event. Here's an extra $5 because you're here early. Get a beer on us or get a soda on us, probably is more.
Well, there's also a lot more expectation that things can
100%.
be delivered in the moment, right?
Yeah.
It's not that was one of the points you made, that the generations of season ticket holders buying things months in advance, that changed during the pandemic.
The opportunist is the profile, the persona that we call that. They're looking for, hey, there's something we can do today, and how do those fans react and go? And they're not going to be your season ticket members, but they are going to be the ones that take advantage of things and interact and pay attention. And it's funny when you talk about the ability to reply in real time, to stay in that moment. That's been a big capability we've had to build out, is that ability to communicate and respond and even have awareness in near real time. Believe it or not, there's still a lot of our business that's on that 24-hour, 2005 ETL structure where you load in a flat file at 3 a.m. and kick off a job at 4 a.m. Right? I mean, still a lot of that here.
Yeah.
So
okay. Let's and that reminds me too, I often ask my CTOs and my CIO guests to talk about what the digital business model means to their particular industry or company. And when you think about the Falcons and doing digital business, what comes to mind? What is different about how you look at it now versus, say, a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think when I think about especially our fans, it's all about learning as much as we can about our fans in ways that are respectful and privacy minded.
Okay.
Using those to facilitate meaningful conversation, to get them the information they want, and to orchestrate amazing experiences that deliver them the products they want. I would say that's probably what digital means to us in that spot. Probably the other side of that is operationally making sure that we run the most operationally efficient stadium in the world, so that when we do things like flip from a Saturday to a Sunday game, we get the insights, we get the data, we get everything we need to delivered in the ways we need it, so that we can make the right decisions. We don't do this yet, but our ability to adjust product or offerings based on the people coming in, that's an opportunity there. We have fan-friendly pricing at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, so we probably won't look at using that data to tweak pricing levels. You can come to our stadium and get a hot dog and a beer and pay $7 for combined, like for everything.
Wow.
It's a great place to watch a game. You really need to be here.
Yeah.
Well, so we're not going to look at, hey, the CIO Leadership Live crowd's coming in, let's jack up prices 20%. We're more looking at, hey, Jeremy's a season ticket member who's been with us for 5 years. Let's make sure we're giving him a little something extra on the side.
Yeah. God, everybody loves a coupon, don't they?
Just a little something to let you know that, hey, we know you, we care about you. Here's something you can have fun. And then for us, that helps generate a digital touch point so we can understand what you value and what you like and some of your preferences.
Well, and the use of that word orchestration, that I know that came up a lot when we were getting ready for this show. And that I wondered, is that becoming the chief technology officers, essentially becoming more and more immersed in orchestration of this sort of work with the data and all. Is that a very common problem that other CTOs and CIOs across the sports and events industry are solving these days?
I think we're ahead of the curve a little bit on that. I think we're seeing it a little bit early. Sports lags in general, because
Okay.
we can. I mean, Atlanta has an interesting challenge in that we don't have a 100,000 person waiting list like the Pittsburgh Steelers do. We got to
Mhm.
work to keep our fans happy, and we do. We have amazing teams here. Tamika Rish, who leads our fan experience group,
Mhm.
and I'm sorry for my little announcement that went out there. But they work their tails off to do things, keep our fans interested, excited. We're number 2 in the NFL in fan experience, and we should have been number 1. We were number 1 last year, and all of our numbers went up. But another stadium, I'm not going to say who they were, they went up just as well. I mean, that's like the battle for
Okay.
the fan, experience there. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, Battle of the Bands can be fun for everybody in a
and
way.
it is one of the events we have.
Yeah.
So
Well, one of the points you made, Jeremy, when we were talking earlier, you said seeing both Carl and AMB and the Falcons embrace this approach to kind of doing it right from the developer perspective, that kind of incredible amounts of time and data collected and then using it in a really good way. Talk about that a little bit more. I take it that you don't see that with everybody you work with.
Yeah, I think it's a constant battle, right? AMBC is special, and the entire sports and entertainment sector is special because it's so data driven. You need to know, as Carl mentioned, about your fans to provide them a good experience, to be a good host, right? To give
Right.
them that free hot dog on the side when they show up and they're a season ticket holder. Not every industry is that driven to be focused on that type of activity. I will say, though, that you said that sports lags a little bit, Carl. I think for y'all, I'm going to disagree. You all are on that cutting edge because a lot of the companies that I still work with have challenges dealing with multiple integration points across all these SaaS products that people are buying these days. Gone are the days of build where build is favored when you're talking build versus buy. The software industry is combinatorially exploded with products that solve your problem and corresponding salespeople that are selling you that product. That you really have to think about integration as being a key piece of your digital strategy as a CIO, right? You're folding your leads into Salesforce, and then you're turning around and pushing that somewhere else. And then you want to take all this data and build some model on top of it to say, what are my customer personas? Who am I trying to go after? What do they care about? How do I find those right buyers for my product, X, Y, Z, and ABC? So I think, the challenge is still there. And I find that specifically at AMBC, y'all do a really good job of that, of taking all of these disparate pieces of information and folding them into something that adds value. So I would look to you as a case study on how to do it right, because you guys have done a fantastic job.
appreciate that. We got to show the outcome of that, and because we are pushing on that. And I think for me in particular, like I see integrations and our ability to handle integrations as a core capability that we need to start picking up. Where historically that has been a use case that you have pushed off to your vendors, right? Yeah, I've got these 3 key products. You guys need to integrate with each other, and y'all figure it out. And maybe I'm paying a big fee for that. Maybe y'all are paying that big fee for that, and we're paying, doing something else. But what we're seeing now, especially since COVID, and it's not because of COVID at all. It's because of the maturity in the development cycle here. Is one, all of these products are investing heavily into that integration layer and capabilities.
Yep.
So everybody has that. And 2, they want to focus on their core product and not necessarily on integrations, or that integration is becoming a whole separate business unit form, which are 2 different things. But by us, again, leaning into that and our ability to handle that, it allows us to create a much more composable ecosystem here that lets us think more about how do we put a best of breed situation in place? How do we do better experimentation? Because I'm not having to say, hey, I want to test out autonomous bartending. Hey, go partner with my biometrics company and do a full integration there. It's hey, Jeremy's team, here's our API endpoint for our biometric authentication. Here's our payment endpoint. Here's our connective tissue layer. How do we make this work? And that's, to me, where that's so important. And we're able to do it now because we're no longer dealing with like DCOM and trying to integrate with stuff on servers that are behind 17 firewalls and in a different PCI compliant zone. We're dealing with APIs that are sitting on a SaaS hosted, sitting a SaaS based solution that it's just a matter of getting the right credentials to.
You said DCOM, my brain just shut down. I'm sorry.
I know, isn't that fun?
No.
And you two know exactly You
No,
two
thank
know
you.
exactly what that means, but I'd be really hard put to tell you much about DCOM.
No, thank you.
But it certainly sounds like the role of data architecture is pretty key here. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you want to take that first, Carl?
You got it.
You're the data guy. Come on, you're the nerd that sits
And
behind
you
the
talk
database.
so eloquently. I'm like a state school guy. You're like a Princeton guy.
Whatever, man. I'm from.
I don't know, Carl. I think you've been talking pretty well so far.
Me too.
Right.
I
We'll
grew up
make
in a
Jeremy take this one first then.
I grew up in a trailer in North Georgia. My Southern's going to come out here in a minute.
Been up there. It's good.
You both have been saying y'all the more relaxed you get. So
Yeah,
that's for
I'm
sure.
a Chicagoan by birth, so I'm betraying my roots.
Yeah. My favorite one of those is all y'all when you're talking about a whole crowd of people.
It's
All
a
right.
bit-
So who wants to talk about data architecture?
I will start. So
All right.
data's a glacier. Everybody knows that. Data's hard.
Yeah.
So I'm a backend developer by trade, just so y'all know. I'm the guy that would talk to the database people and say, hey, this is the schema I want to implement, and they would tell me no and go rebuild it and hand it back to me right back in the day when I was doing my rounds at various clients. So data architecture to me is incredibly important to get right up front. I've always been slightly more meticulous than your average software engineer when we're talking about data, because there's a lot of really cool technologies out there like code first design, which Entity Framework does that, and Hibernate has a little bit of that too. Rails is great at sort of providing active records type stuff, and again, I'm spouting off nonsense, Mary Fran, but the idea here is that data is something that has to be focused on early. And since we had the data warehousing boom, again, yet another technology boom in our lifetimes, that produced this thought process of, okay, we need to mine our data for interesting things to then turn into business value. It's even that much more important, especially with AI sort of, again, exploding onto the scene. Now it's even 100 times more important that your data is good. With AI, you could be a little bit more sloppy because AI is smart and it can train on models and things and figure out based on unstructured data what you're trying to do. But data architecture is a thing that I like to focus on when I'm talking to CIO clients or friends or whatever. Whenever we're building a new platform or a new product, data architecture is one of the things that we sit down and have a chat around. How do we make sure that this is extensible moving forward? And how do we make sure that we can mine this? That's a question you weren't asking 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it's about how do I get it into persistence? That's all that matters, that my data's there and my OLTP is doing the thing. And then OLAP came along and people were talking about cubes and crazy business analytics stuff. In 2024, what we care about is how do we turn data into a monetized business proposition? And I think that we got to be careful about that because there's privacy implications, as y'all discussed. But it's a very, very important thing to focus on when you're building your product or you're adding on to your existing product to get that right out the gate so you can feed that into your analytics team.
Yeah.
I'll say the other area when it comes to data architecture, it's becoming more and more a word that I use all the time, and I can't quite figure out how to actually implement it yet, but it's data governance.
Yeah, that's hard.
I think that's data governance at scale is going to be the next kind of layer to data architecture about what is this data? Is it accurate? What's in it? How do we get to it? Who's using it, et cetera? And that's going to really take off with some of the automated tools that are coming out there. You already have it with the Calibras and everything else. And View is going to be Microsoft's attempt that they rebrand at some point a year and a half from now into something else, and then it actually sticks. And that data architecture is really important. And the other area, though, that I think when you're talking integrations is equally important is system architecture. Understanding how you're moving stuff from one system to another. And that requires you to obviously have a good understanding of the data architecture of both systems, or at least the interface, of those two. But how are you transferring that data? How are you making sure that, again, that's where that holistic view of your business is so important, and it's so hard. It hurts, right? But you got to be thinking about, A, B, C, D, E, and like, all right, we need it to end up down here, but it's got to pinball through. It's like playing lemmings or something. It's got to kind of figure that out.
Okay, well, I want to pivot over to AI, and I'm reminded one of the quotes I have from Carl when we talked earlier. He said, "Today AI is kind of dumb."
Yep.
And
I agree.
So I'm going to make you extend on that a little bit. But consequently, it really is going to be some very big changes in more probably than any part of the IT world or the technology world. Developers are affected by this. And there's so much care and feeding around the right or the wrong data ending up in your large language models. So I'm sure you didn't mean anything quite as simplistic as I threw it out there, Carl, but go ahead and tell us about where you are with AI.
So AI, I said AI is dumb because like anything you look at now has AI worked into some kind of tagline, some kind of something. And when you talk with people, it just seems like people have learned that they can use the word AI and it's like they're genie in a bottle that gets them what they want. And it means that you can avoid certain things and not having to do things like, hey, what are you actually wanting to do? And where does the data actually, and I get that there's like, it's probably not as like, I definitely think about things in rows and tables still a little bit, right? I know that there's a rigidity to me that I need to soften on. But like when I have a coach come in and say, man, I want to use AI to tell us what plays to call. I'm like, all right, you just don't, you don't say, hey, point to this and say, what play should I run? Like there's some work involved in that. And some of that work involves, again, some of the, we talk data architecture and data governance and making sure that we've got the right things there. Some of that is in making sure we've got the outcomes determined that we want to get to, and be out there. But I think it's one of those things to where it's almost like when you had that friend that said, hey, let's go build an app. And it's a great idea and it's good and we need to build an app. But like, you don't just, like there's so much that goes into it that to do it correctly, it's almost like oversimplified.
Yes. And I go on record with Keith a lot on this in the Tech Talk show.
Well, and one of the points you made, you did one of your articles on this was about AI, and you made the point that it has broken out from fringe curiosity to cultural obsession. So I thought that was very poetic. That may have been your editor, but it may have also just been you.
My editor and I just sit around and I talk to them and they just write whatever nonsense comes out of my mouth. So, I don't know, maybe I said it, maybe I'm not, but he's smarter than me. No, I think, and the funny thing, Carl, I hadn't heard that before. So here's a fun thought exercise. What if two coaches are using AI to call plays? What's going to happen?
Yeah, exactly.
They're probably just going to deadlock and you're just going to run the perfect plays and you have a zero-sum game. It's not fun. Nobody wants to watch it, right? So who knows? Yeah. AI is one of those things that, I studied AI in school, right? I have a master's degree in computer science. I took AI with Charles Isbell, who's an amazing human being. And I implemented all those algorithms, right? I wrote using a framework, K-means. I spent times understanding what these things do. And it's all statistics, it's all math. It's very, very cool. And it can add immense value to humanity once we figure out all of the rules and regulations around it. But I agree with Carl. Right now, AI is dumb. It's just a buzzword that people use to sell you their product. And we're going to figure this out, right? In probably 5 or 10 months, somewhere in there, we'll be like, all right, we're kind of heading on that adoption curve. We know that AI is good for things. We know it's great for increasing developer productivity. We know it's awesome for solving this base set of problems in our world. And it's going to become the next tool that everybody uses to make their lives better. The thing I love the most about AI is specifically ChatGPT is it solves a lot of human-computer interaction problems that people have with computers, right? I studied HCI in my undergrad, and what that basically is speaking to is, can my grandmother jump on my computer and talk to it and say, hey, I want to learn a new recipe for cornbread, and all of a sudden it's like, here you go. You can do that now. That's amazing. That's really cool. I used to do this with Wikipedia because I'm a nerd and I just read Wikipedia for whatever reason. So now you have a computer that you can talk to that can give you information in a real-time way that you can learn. It has a huge implications in education. It has huge implications across the entire spectrum of technology. But as of right now, be wary if anybody tacks AI on the end of their product name. You should be like, well, do you really know what you're doing?
Well, it's like there's a legitimate, like AI can solve a ton of problems and like 100% will be using AI to help us understand and analyze and, hey, is this an effective play call against this defense, given the historical context of who we're going against and what formations we come out in and what defense they're playing and, 100% there'll be some of that out there.
Yes.
But it's not quite as simple as saying, hey, what's the play call to run? So, well, it won't start there. It'll get there. But
it'll get there, but that's a reductionist view, and again, it's just because people don't understand it, and as more information gets out there and people start understanding what it is and what this tool is good for, just like when the iPhone came out, it was a little bit easier to understand what you do with an iPhone. It's a phone, but there's also so many implications to the platform, and I have a calculator in my pocket now, which I didn't have when I was growing up. Right, I grew up as a millennial. I didn't have the internet. If I wanted a calculator, I had to go to my car and get one. Now I just whip my phone out and I can do like complex algebra on my phone if I want to.
Yeah. And it's more of a supercomputer in your pocket now.
Yeah,
compared
for
to,
sure. Yeah.
When I think about the potential of technology and some of the obvious things we all want to get to, I always think of a story from when my son was probably 3 years old, and he had put a VCR tape. Anybody remember VCR machines?
Yep.
Put a VCR tape in to watch, I think it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And he stood there looking at it for a minute, and then he leaned over and he said, "Play." And he is today a senior software engineer at Google. And
That's awesome.
so, the way technology is advancing, and the way it remains so fascinating to talk about, I think has been very well demonstrated by you both today. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for the CIO Leadership Live episode. It's been wonderful having you here.
Thanks for
Right.
having me.
We can hang out with J-Dove. I'll do it. So
Let's go do it.
There you go. There you
Beers
go.
after this, right? Beers after this.
Beers after-
everyone for the
honestly,
day?
Wild Leap in Atlanta at 5:00. So that's
Okay. And I do think we've used the word beer more often on this
That's
episode.
the way it should be with developers.
Yes,
So
we win.
Code and writing code is fun. It
Exactly.
should always be fun. Sports is fun. The two together should be really fun, and it's not always. So
Well, and I've enjoyed learning so much more about the developer experience and how
Yeah.
we need to focus on that. And a lot of it does seem to boil down to treating people like the incredibly smart human beings that they are.
Yes,
And
100%.
letting them be creative and letting them build.
Exactly.
I'll say one last thing about that. When we look for technical people, we look for analysts in football. Analysts love coming to work for us. Like, oh, I can work in sports, killer, I'll do it. When we
Yeah.
go to developers could give two shits if they come to work in sports or not. Like they want to build and create and have an environment where they can do that.
Right.
That's all that they care about. And if it's in sports, cool. If it's in
Cool.
warehouse design,
Yeah.
cool. If it's
Yep.
healthcare, cool. They just want to be able to do cool things. And that's
Yeah.
been true for a while.
Mastery
industries-
and purpose, right?
Yep. Some industries get this a little bit better rap than others. And I do agree. It's all about the culture that you provide and good leadership. And can I come in and do something fun? Yep.
Okay. All right, good. Well, this has really been fun with both of you today. So thank you.
Yes.
If you joined us late today, do not despair. You can watch the full episode later here today on LinkedIn, but also on CIO.com and, of course, on CIO's channel on YouTube. Leadership Live is also available as an audio podcast wherever you find your podcasts. And I hope that you enjoyed this double-barreled conversation about developers with CTO Carl Pierberg of AMB Sports and Entertainment and CEO Jeremy Duval of 7Factor Software. We're going to be back again next month on Wednesday, March 20th at noon Eastern with Karen Higgins Carter, who is the CIO of Gilbane Building Company. So we'll be talking a lot about the construction industry and some of the issues going on there. Please do take a moment to subscribe to CIO's YouTube channel, where you can find more than 125 similarly fascinating episodes and conversations on CIO Leadership Live. And we also have expanded around the world. There's now 6 international editions of Leadership Live podcast in places like Canada, India, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and the Middle East. So join us. We'll be watching for you. And thanks for watching us today.